Hi, it's Manic44 here, and today I welcome you in the review of the G&G TR16 MBR 556WH. G&G has in its portfolio budget replicas from the Combat Machine series, as well as more expensive models for example, the GC series. But it's the TR16 series with the G2 gearbox that at the moment is the top shelf of this manufacturer. And the 556WH model is one of its representatives. Today, I am the sponsor of this episode. For a long time I wanted to buy a replica from so-called top tier, and after looking at the offers of other manufacturers, I decided to go with G&G. Mainly because of the G2 gearbox and the ETU system, but about that later in the review. Today we will see what we got in the box, how the replica is built both from outside and inside, and what performance it has. And at the end of the video I will try to tell you what I personally think about it. Now let's start with a little unboxing. The replica comes to us in a very nice, richly decorated cardboard box. On the front we'll find a photo of the replica with its most important advantages, and on the back we'll find a short history of the G&G brand, a description of their logotype, a map of the countries where we can find their products, and some information about the G2 gearbox used in the replica. In the box itself we will find quite detailed manual in several languages, catalog with offered replica models, a very old school speed loader, ramrod, dedicated midcap for 90 BBs, and of course replica itself. Let's take a closer look at it. The length of the replica with the folded stock is about 91 cm and with the full extended stock is about 101 cm. The whole thing weighs just over 3 kg. Looking at the replica we can immediately see that we are dealing with a high quality product. Almost the entire replica is made of metal, only the pistol grip and the telescopic stalk are made of polymer. On the end of the barrel there is a characteristic massive flash hider under which a standard left-handed thread is hidden. To get to it, just unscrew the screw and you can unscrew the flash hider itself. The 41 cm M-lock front is made of aluminium. It is finished with a matte black color, decorated with an M-lock and G&G Taiwan Armament logo. The finish itself is very pleasant to the touch. We have a lot of places for mounting M-lock accessories, and the top of the front is decorated with wrist rail that goes along its entire length, and it fits perfectly with the rail for the replica body. An interesting fact is that the rail is hollowed in the middle to reduce the weight of the front. It also adds an interesting appearance to the rail itself. In the front we can also see a dummy gas pipe. The replica has a set of metal iron sights in the form of a folding vertically adjustable front sight and a folding adjustable vertically and horizontally rear sight. Of course, the sights can be uninstalled. The body of the replica is made of aluminium alloy. Just like the front, it is finished in a matte black color. Both upper and lower has a very characteristic design and quite thick walls. The body itself does not lack manufacturer's logo or information about the model and serial number. We can also find a sling mount on both sides. The trigger guard itself is enlarged, which will make it easier to use with gloves, and a flat trigger has a quite long movement, and only at the very end you can feel the click of the micro switch in the ETU system. But the reset is ultra short, thanks to which we can quickly fire another shot. The pistol grip is made of polymer, it's quite large and has clear indentations for the fingers, and a texture that improves the grip. Personally, I do not have too large hands, so I do not put my fingers into prepared creases, and the grip is not very comfortable for me. We'll also find a sticker on it with the warning that I will like to remove after this review, and from the bottom we have a standard motor height adjustment. The replica has a telescopic stock with 6 setting points. After setting the length, we can additionally lock the lever to protect the stock from accidentally folding. The stock has also a small compartment to which we have access by pressing this button. In the compartment we can hide, for example, a 2 CR123 batteries. There is also a place on the stock for mounting a push-sling mount, but due to its location it's not very practical. To get inside the stock, press this button and turn the buttstock to the side. In the stock we'll find a wiring with a small Tamiya plug and a MOSFET system that gives us some interesting functions, but more on that later. The system is quite large and takes up some space, but I had no problem to fit an 11.1 volt 1200 mAh LiPo battery inside the stock. The replica has ambidextrous manipulators such as a 3-stage fire selector with standard settings: safety, single fire and continuous fire, or after programming one of the 2 burst modes. The magazine release is also ambidextrous. The magazine itself sits very tightly and has minimal play. Same for enlarged charging handle. After pulling it back, the shell ejection window will open and the dummy bolt will lock in the rear position. We now have access to the rotary hop-up chamber. By turning the knob, we increase the hop-up power, and by turning it down, we decrease it. It's worth noting that the chamber works with a characteristic click, which is to reduce the possibility of its losing adjustment, but slightly reduces the precision of the settings. After setting the hop-up, in order to close the dummy bolt, just press its release on the other side and close the window itself. The whole replica is fitted very well and makes a very solid impression. The only things I could complain about is the slight moving barrel, which I learned is standard in these replicas, and the slack on the stock does not go away after locking it. Both problems are something I will have to work on, but I don't think it will be too hard. The 90mm mid-cap magazine from the set is made of plastic. It is longer than a standard Stanek and has some interesting modern design. The magazine has 2 interesting functions. First is the BB pressure that goes far beyond the magazine, thanks to which each BB is fed and will not experience BBs falling out of the chamber when changing the magazine. The second function is reserved for replicas with G2 gearbox and the ETO system. It is this element that hides when the magazine is empty, thanks to which the ETO system knows that there are no BBs in the replica and will not shoot, which simulates the behavior of a real weapon. The magazine is compatible with most M4 replicas on the market. Finally, it's worth saying a few words about the ETU system itself. It is the electronic trigger unit. It is a system that replaced the standard contacts. It works on microswitches such as the Jevtron Leviathan system that I have reviewed. Thanks to use of the microswitch, we have a very short trigger at the very end with a clear reset, which allows us to quickly fire single shots. Because there is no normal context here, the circuit breaker activates another microswitch, thanks to which the MOSFET system knows if a full cycle has been performed. The last function that the ETU has is the empty magazine sensor that can be found inside the magwell. If the magazine has BBs, the lever remains pressed. If there are no BBs, the magazine releases it, which cuts the power supply and will not fire. And also will not fire when the magazine is not plugged in. But don't worry, the replica works with regular AAG magazines, but the function cutting power when there is no BBs is not working. In addition to the ETU, the replica has a MOSFET system, which thanks to the LED diode and a buzzer can inform us about the excessive battery discharge or a problem with the gearbox operation. In addition, thanks to use of a MOSFET, we can program a 3-shot or 5-shot burst instead of the continuous fire mode. In order to program a 3-shot burst, hold the trigger pressed for about 10 seconds, which will lead to the buzzer sound. For a 5-shot burst, it's enough to switch the fire selector 5 times between fire mode semi and auto, which also will end with a characteristic sound. To return to the automatic fire mode, just hold the trigger again for 10 seconds on the semi. Let's see how the replica takes apart and what parts are inside. We will start by separating the body. To do this, we have to knock out this front pin. It does not come out completely, so we will not lose it. Now we can pull both halves apart. When separating it, may be necessary to pull back the charging handle, which is caught by the tabs on the gearbox. With the front off, we can remove the 463mm long and 6.08mm in diameter precision barrel with the chamber. As I mentioned, we have a rotation type chamber and the knob clicks during adjustment, which is to ensure that the chamber will not lose its settings. To disassemble the hop-up chamber, the knob is best to set to 0, then just pull the pressure spring from the barrel and then the clip. Now we can carefully pull the barrel with the backing. The installed blue G&G backing is quite soft and it's to be resistant to low temperatures. It has 2 tabs instead of 1, which is to improve the stability of the BB flight. I will start disassembling the front by unscrewing the flash hider. Then I unscrew the 8 screw holding the front. When you screw them back in, be careful not to strip threads in the aluminum front mounting ring. Then we can carefully slide the front off. Not an easy task because it's put together quite tightly. We can now unscrew the dummy gas block. It stays on 1 screw, then the whole block should come off. Now to unscrew the nut holding the barrel, a special key is used for this, but since I don't have it, I use the ring pliers. After unscrewing, we can remove the nut and front mounting, and then the outer barrel itself. Now let's move to the bottom. I will start by disassembling the stock. To do this, I have to grab this pin and pull it down strongly, and then the stock itself to the back. It should come off. Watch out for the MOSFET in the stock. I can now use a long screwdriver to unscrew the screw holding the spring guide. Now, after pulling the guide a bit, we will see the MOSFET connections, unfasten them and disconnect the ETO plug. Now I can remove the MOSFET and the stock guide itself. It is time for the pistol grip. Unscrew these two screws and remove the motor cover. Then unfasten the power cables and I can pull out the entire motor. In this case, E325K, a very nice strong motor which will be perfect for upgrading the replica. Now it remains to unscrew these two screws holding the grip and we are done. We still have to disassemble the magazine release that is holding on one screw. Unscrew the fire selectors on both sides and here attention. The selectors have a small ball and a spring that is responsible for blocking them in the selected mode. When removing the selectors, be careful not to lose them. We also need to disassemble the lock release. Just knock out this pin and we can remove the release button. Now it remains to knock out the trigger pin and a large pin on the back. Now the whole gearbox should come out without any problems. At this point, the gears from the right selector may fall off, so be careful. An interesting fact is that the lower, even inside, has G&G markings. The gears from the right selector are holding on the grease, so they shall not come off by themselves, but it's a good time to remove both of them, not just the bigger one as I did. The replica is equipped with a G2 gearbox. It is a construction based on the classic version 2 gearbox, but with a few improvements that are to increase the durability. The gearbox does not have a classic cutout in the rear part through which we can see the pistons work, but there is a small inspection window at the height of the piston gear. On the front it is clearly visible that the shell has been extended with additional reinforcements. The cylinder window has been rounded corners which should reduce the stress and increase the strength of the frame. As for me, it could be slightly run over with a file to remove the scraps. Due to the fact that there is no much space in the replica, G&G has expanded the shell walls to the inside, which is also supposed to increase the durability, but it requires to use a non-standard tappet plate. Now we will see what we can find inside. First I have to disassemble the dummy bolt and its lock. I start by unscrewing the screw holding the bolt return spring. Then unscrew the bolt's latch release button. After unscrewing it, the catch will fall out of the other side. Then I unscrew the 4 screws holding the guides. After that I can remove the entire dummy bolt. Before I go to opening the gearbox, I will pull out the spring, turn the guide by 45 degrees and this one comes out with spring without any problems. The guide itself is a metal and has a bearing, while the spring has a regular coil pitch and it's quite hard. This is the point where I lost my warranty. The shell is fastened with 8 screws. 4 at the bottom are long and the top 4 are short. The gearbox halves fit really well and I had to pry them off with a small screwdriver in several places to separate them. At this point a small gear fell from the selector off. The replica uses 8mm ball bearings and all parts in the gearbox are probably lubricated. We will not find a huge drops of grease in the gearbox corners. Everything is as it should. Typnomatic System consists of a polymer piston with a 15-tooth metal jaw to which a polymer piston head with a bearing is mounted. It is interesting that the head is not ventilated. I have the impression that is the G&G's answer to the cracking piston heads in other models. This will not break so easily, but it will drag the dust into the cylinder. Unfortunately, I did not record it, but in the center of the head, where you can see the stain, was just a dust root that is stuck to the stain. The double-sealed cylinder head has a large rubber bumper which is press-fitted. The head itself sits very well in the cylinder and keeps a seal. The replica has a Type 2 cylinder made of brass. The aluminium nozzle is double-sealed and it measures approx 21.2 mm. The whole set passes the syringe test without any problems, both on the hidden nozzle and fully extended one. The tappet plate is made of rather stiff black polymer and has a strong spring. It is worth noting that due to the thicker walls of the gearbox, the plate has a narrow red front. The gearbox is properly shimmed, and the gears rotate without much resistance. The piston rack has only 13 instead of 15 teeth. This is the so-called short stroke, thanks to which the cycle is shorter and the piston is released earlier. As you can see, it does not catch the last 3 teeth on the piston, thanks to which the shot fires faster and we have a higher rate of fire. The downside is a smaller amount of air in the system, which does not matter much because we have a cylinder with a hole installed anyway. It is worth noting that the teeth are cut on one side, thanks to which the rack works quieter. The center gear is completely standard. An interesting thing is the motor gear with 5 anti-return teeth and a characteristic narrowing, which is also supposed to affect the sound of the gearbox. The flat trigger used in the replica is interesting. It has a metal plate that presses on the micro switch. It is slightly flexible, thanks to which we will not damage the button in the ETU when the trigger is pressed harder. Any other standard trigger can be also installed in the replica. But if necessary, I would suggest to leaving the standard one, or choosing the one with a forward movement adjustment, so not to damage the button in the ETU. The wiring in the gearbox is held in place by tabs, and in the most exposed place to damage by the gears, it is protected by a plastic plug. The whole gearbox is made and put together very well. Opening it will not end with any loose elements or parts popping out by springs. Normally I put a magnet under the gearbox to hold the gears. There is no need for that in here. We know how the replica is built, now let's see what its performance is. My replica with 0.2 gram BBs generates about 387 FPS, which gives about 1.39 joules, with the rate of fire is about 21 BBs per second. On 0.3 gram BBs we will achieve the best result. This weight will use up all the air in the system, so we can see a profit up to 1.45 joules. But my experience shows that the stock hop-up cannot pull such heavy BBs. Above 0.3 gram BBs we will notice a visible decrease in energy due to not have enough air in the system, mainly due to the use of the Type 2 cylinder. If you're going to use heavier BBs, I recommend replacing the cylinder with a minimum of Type 1 or preferably 0. I carry out shooting tests on 0.28 gram BBs from G&G. Shooting at 30 meters, I can hit a human torso-sized target without any problems on semi and full auto. Shooting at 40 meters, I still have no problems hitting the target. At 50 meters it starts to get interesting. Most of the shots hit the target, but the BBs start to escaping to the side. But the more interesting is the fact that when shooting full auto, some BBs fly clearly up, as if the hop-up is overhopping them. I do not know what exactly causes it, but I have the impression that when firing full auto, something seals up and I have more power, and thus the BBs are more curved. As if I were to bet, the problem is probably sealed on the hop-up rubber. 60 meters is an absolute maximum. It is possible to hit at this distance, but it will be quite difficult. At this distance, it's best to see how the BBs are clearly pulled upwards by shooting full auto. If not for the fact that in the standard configuration the hop-up chamber could not pull heavier BBs than 0.28 gram, I think the results can't be better with the use of heavier BBs, because most of the missed shots looks as the BBs were simply blown away by wind. Summarizing, the G&G TR16 MBR 556WH is a replica with a long name and an equally long barrel. It is made very carefully and makes a very good impression. The long M-LOK rail gives us a lot of space for mounting accessories, the two-sided manipulators makes the replica easy to use no matter which hand you shoot from, and the flat trigger is comfortable, and thanks to the use of the ETU it has a very short reset, thanks to which we can quickly fire more shots. The MOSFET used protects the battery from discharging and gives us additional possibilities in a form of bursts of 3 and 5 shots. And I like the cutoff feature if there is no magazine attached or when there are no BBs in it. At first glance it may seem like a gimmick, but I personally felt the operation of the system when I wanted to take a shot, but nothing happened, because I had no BBs. In another replica, an empty shot will have been fired, which will reveal my position and I will have no chance without ammunition. Here the opponent did not find about my presence, which gave me the time to reload and change the plan. In the stock, despite the presence of a MOSFET, there is a lot of space for the battery and it has an additional compartment, but it is a pity that it has such a slack. A slight movement can also be found on the barrel itself, but I think these are the charms of a free-float system. But I'm not a big fan of the pistol grip and I will probably change it. As for the gearbox itself, it's made very well and pneumatics keeps the seal, everything is well lubricated and properly shimmed. The shell itself is reinforced and has rounded corners, which gives hope that it will be durable. I'm not a fan of the piston head used, which draws air and dust through the front without ventilation, and the second type cylinder use, which slightly limits the use of heavier BBs. The rotating hop-up chamber has a very clear jump during adjustment, and the backing used gives us a quite nice and repeatable BB flight path. But it cannot cope with heavier than 0.28 gram BBs. It may be enough to change the spacer to a harder one, or maybe you will need to change the rubber. Unfortunately, I don't know that. Additionally, it is interesting that the BBs are flying upwards when firing bursts, but I have the impression that is also related to the hop-up, which it will be a good idea to seal it up more. I'm really happy with the replica straight out of the box. Gearbox sounds very good and it has a nice performance for a stock replica. At the time of shooting this review it costs about 400 euros, but before the current situation in the world you could buy it for about 340 euros or something, so it's possible that it's only a temporary price. Anyway, with my discount code on Gunfire you can lower its price a bit. It's not a small amount, but as you have seen, the quality of both materials and the workmanship justifies it in my opinion. I bought it with further upgrades in mind, so I look at it as more as a base than a finished product. Although I really like the installed ETU and its functions, and it's one of the reasons why I choose this model. Yes, the barrel moves a little bit and the stock also has some slack, but it's nothing I can handle, and only the non-ported piston head that tends to suck dust into the cylinder is a mystery to me. But let's face it, there is no perfect replica right out of the box. In the near future I would like to increase its power and accuracy, which I will want to achieve among others by installing some pneumatic parts from Airsoft parts, and of course hop-up chamber from Max model, and a better precision barrel. Today it will be all. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to do an episode about upgrading the replica and how you liked today's episode. And for now, thanks for watching and see you next time.